welcome back to Tab U. My name's Katrina, your host of the new series exploring all things property, lending, finance, leases, you name it. Today I am joined by Dani Netzer from Tab and our very special guest, Colin Horton. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. So my name's Colin Horton. By trade, I am a surveyor. We have a surveying firm called Projects & Co. And that does everything possible in the surveying world. I'm also a failed TV star and a bit of a LinkedIn, I like to think, influencer, but people may disagree on
our
that one.
biggest guest on this show yet. No offence to everybody else who's been on the game.
I am the first guest.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Today, you're going to be our expert on leaseholds, short term, all sorts.
Yeah.
So I hope you know all the answers.
So do I.
We'll kick things off with discussing a couple of facts, and then we'll go into some of the key questions that are being asked around the topic. Dani, would you like to introduce yourself before we get going?
Yes, sure. Not as famous as Colin, obviously. I run Tab Property, which is a fractional ownership business within Tab, where we give opportunities to people to invest as little as £1,000 into property. And actually, I'm very interested in the topic today, simply because a lot of the properties we're looking at are commercial, residential, particularly leaseholds. So really keen to hear what you got to say, really.
Nice.
Great. Well, this is more of just what is leasehold ownership, but leasehold ownership is where the owner has the right to occupy and use the property for a fixed period as specified in the lease agreement. The freeholder owns the land and building. Leaseholders are usually required to pay an annual ground rent to the freeholder. How does short-term leaseholds differ from a freehold property and then long-term leaseholds? And just generally, can you give our audience a little bit of info around
Of course.
it all?
So at the moment, leasehold is a very prominent issue in the property sector. Maybe it's because I'm immersed in that world, but it's all I see in my press. And the government are very much using leasehold now as a form of political jostling to try and win some votes, because they believe the leasehold system is fundamentally broken, and a lot of people probably listening and in the country will probably agree with them. And don't get me wrong, there are a few flaws. Just for full openness, I am a freeholder myself. I'm a leaseholder, and we do invest in short lease properties. And I'm a leaseholder and enfranchisement valuer. So I like to think I look at things from a whole, various different opinions. And I think for me, there are a few flaws with the current system that we currently have.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what people need to understand is that they seem to think leasehold is just, you're just giving your money away, you're losing that money. It's just about managing your asset correctly. That's all it is. It's not, people let the leases fall below 80 years, it all starts to depreciate in value. But you're just not looking after it properly. It's like, if anything, just look after it. And, you'll preserve the value. Don't get me wrong, there are some notorious freeholders out there that you do want to try and avoid. Feel free to message me independently and I'll let you know who they are. But on the whole, it's a sector that I think is going to get reworked and is going to become more modernised. It's quite archaic in its nature. It hasn't really been touched since 2002 and then originally in 1993. And it is a little bit outdated, and there are a lot of nuances in there at the moment which do make it tricky for potential investors to explore because they just don't understand it. And there's a lot of things like, why am I paying 150 quid for a pet license? And a lot of these things exist for quite logical reasons, and I think sometimes you have to strip back the emotion and just look at it from a business point of view. Like, a lot of people will moan when people, the freeholder's charging me to take down a structural wall.
Yeah.
Well, they're obviously going to charge you because you're potentially risking the integrity of that building. They've got to make sure that it's structurally sound, and they, ever since Grenfell, you have to, God, I've touched so many subjects. So many subjects here. Yeah. But freeholders just need to make sure that they look after their buildings. So a lot of these clauses that exist in leases are simply there to protect the building's infrastructure.
Got it. So leases can range from short, 6 months, to long, 999 years. Why, I guess the question is, like, what is a short-term leasehold? And I guess what are the disadvantages of it, or or advantages.
No, of course, no. So I'm guessing a lot of your listeners are going to be investors generally.
Yeah.
And for me at the moment, short lease is the best investment strategy in terms of from a de-risked point of view and return on cash. So when I say short lease, I'm talking anything sub 80 years. Now that's when the arbitrage becomes available to these investors, and it's a really cool place to be if you know what you're doing. There are a few people out online that will make it sound like you can do it yourself. But unless you've got the right practitioners involved, and I'm not saying me, there's some brilliant surveyors out there, but chaps like us, decent lawyers and decent funders that understand it, like you guys, you're going to struggle because it ain't going to work because there's so many issues. Now, for me, so anything sub 80 years is classed as a short lease.
Yeah.
80 to 85 is in that risky zone because at the moment, if you buy a flat and the existing owner doesn't serve what's called a Section 42 notice, which is a compulsory purchase order fundamentally to extend your lease, then you have to wait 2 years. And if a lease falls below 80 years, the cost to extend the lease with 80 years and 1 day compared to extend the lease with 79 years, 364 days, there's just 2 days difference. It will double in value overnight.
Wow. And
people just don't understand this. So making sure that you are working with the right professionals.
Yeah.
This happens a lot with auction purchases.
And so I guess in that scenario where you've got 2 days different,
Yep.
presumably you want to get it done before it falls, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
once you serve that Section 42 notice, that date is locked in. So the lease technically will look like it's 79 years and 6 months, but that date, that Section 42 notice serves, locks in that lease length.
Fine.
But you have to do it before it falls below 80 years. Otherwise, the cost is just going to double.
Wow. And then who would be able to advise on that? Like, who would it be? Would it be coming from surveyors? Would it be coming from you guys?
Well, do you know what's terrifying? It should be the agents. It should be the estate agents that should be advising of this. A lot of the short lease stuff you'll see now, and I guess a lot of guys that you'll be working with come from the auctions.
Yeah.
We bought some from auctions and had our fair share of successes, but also had some absolute freaking nightmares. So it's just in the perfect world, you'd have all the leasehold tenure details on Rightmove first.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not many agents do it now because the good way to kind of identify it is it will say cash buyers only, and then they tend to be short leases generally. You can kind of navigate through it. Then the next stage would generally be your lawyer would be pointing out that it's a short lease, ideally. Touch wood, do it good. And don't get a conveyancer mixed up with a leasehold enfranchisement practitioner. They're very different things. And a lot of conveyancers will say they can do leasehold enfranchisement, but they can't. It's a really complex bit of legislation. And then, like I said, there are a lot of nuances that if you mess it up, especially when you're assigned a Section 42 notice, it can be catastrophic. Like we've got a case at the moment. We bought one at auction back in June now. This is on Homes on the Hammer, this one actually. So I'm quite. I've done my first bit. It's literally just finished the refurbishment, and we're doing a simultaneous exit. So extend the lease on exit. However, the freeholders now decided to say that because the person that we bought from at auction was a trader, they basically back-to-back the deal. They're saying that the Section 42 wasn't assigned correctly. So it's only because our lawyer is an expert that he's confirmed that it is. But if you haven't got the right lawyers in place, you can really mess it up. Then once you've had the lawyer, then it goes to your valuer. A general guide is just to go on the Leasehold Advisory website. There's a calculator on there that'll give you a rough guide of what you're looking at premium wise, but that is not enough for you to negotiate a premium yourself, just because it doesn't take into account all the factors.
Yeah.
And then, so you've had your agent, you've had your solicitor, you've had your surveyor, and then it should go to the broker, who will then hopefully go to the lender, and the lender will understand it. But you'd be amazed how many lenders don't understand it and how many brokers ain't got a clue.
So just if you want to get involved early on, so obviously you mentioned about opportunities out there in the market.
Yeah.
So at what stage would you get which person exactly involved?
Yeah, okay, so fine. So I'll talk you through our process. So we'll see one on Rightmove. Really, only because we know, because we know the market, we generally go to the broker first. I've just contradicted exactly what I'm saying. But it's because I know what I'm doing. It's because I know what I'm doing. But if you know you've got a lender that you can work with really quickly to get the deal done, I mean, bank, a lot of this short lease stuff, you need to move fast on, because there was a lot. I was talking about Westcliff in my hometown near Southend on Sea. there's a lot of short lease stuff, but as soon as it comes on the market, it's gone. It just goes so quickly. If you are a layman and you are going to, let's use auction because I think that's generally where potentially listeners are going to pick up short lease stuff. Always get your conveyancer, or your conveyancer should be able to do this. It's just to make sure they read through the legal pack. Just make sure they guide you just on that.
Yeah.
They will then be able to point you in the right direction of where to go. Your surveyor, usually we're probably a little bit further down the line generally, just purely for the fact that one, there's a fee that comes with surveying, and you can't always guarantee that you're going to end up going through the transaction. But generally, a decent conveyancer that you've got a good relationship won't charge more than a couple of £100 just to check.
Yeah.
And people think they can do it themselves, but even us, we've made the mistakes of not looking through it correctly and missing out on an overage clause or something, which was a bit of a nightmare. So going back to the point, sorry, I go on tangents sometimes.
That's interesting.
But yeah, always speak to your solicitor first. And you should be doing both of these at the same time, generally. Your broker will have a good idea, and so will your solicitor, but just make sure they check over it for you. And if you're just going through Rightmove, just speak to the agent, get them to confirm the address for you, and then they only probably do that when you confirm a viewing.
Yeah.
They think you might be trying to nick the listing, and then just download the leasehold register. And if you're struggling to download the leasehold register, just message me and I'll just download it for you. It's fine.
All the details will be provided in the show notes.
Does it make a difference? Who's the freeholder?
Yeah. So, do you know what? They ain't going to be listening. So freshwater, I'm sure you guys have dealt with. I don't think they're based a million miles away from here, or under the Dejan Hortons Group. They are quite very commercially minded when it comes to being a freeholder. So just bear that in mind when you do come up against guys like that. A simple way to do it is just to Google them. If you see loads of, no freeholder's ever going to get a great review because of just nature of their investment, but certain freeholders are going to have some horrific reviews. A lot of them have changed the way they are now, and there are some really good freeholders out there. A lot of the institutional ones are great. So my clients are institutional pension funds, and they're really, really good freeholders, and they look after their blocks. But stuff like freshwater, for argument's sake, they won't mind me saying this, their part of their strategy is to drag it out. They drag it out over 10 to 12 months, so much so that it will get to the steps of what's called a tribunal, and it's bullying fundamentally, but they get a deal. They get a deal. It's great business. It works phenomenally, and I respect it from a negotiating point of view. But if you're on the wrong end of it, or you're relying on bridging or something like that, then you have to factor that into your decision making when you look at the deal. And sometimes ones that have been up for a long time may well be the reason that the freeholders are a bit of a nasty bit of work.
Although now with the new legislation coming in, presumably, stringing things along might not necessarily end up being beneficial.
Well, you like to think so. Like we see a lot of freeholders now have really softened their approach. They really have softened their approach.
Is that because regulations incoming?
They have.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like stuff with the owner's ground rent side of things, where you guys will be aware of, where the ground rents are doubling every 10 years. Doesn't sound too drastic. But obviously, when you map it out on an Excel spreadsheet, it looks horrific.
Yeah.
When you're in that world, it's just discounted cash flow. You can kind of see, well, actually, the net present value of that ground rent isn't actually that bad, but it does scare people. So a lot of freeholders have really, really kind of tried to clear up the market, because there was a bit of a gravy train a few years ago. Freeholders were making a lot of money, and it was a great investment. And I come from a freeholder background, so I do have a slight leniency towards freeholders. I do appreciate the way they work. But yeah, just do your research. Just make sure you do your. And there will be some that are just obscure people, and they may well be greedy. But also, you got to remember, it's maybe their one payday. So that's all it is.
So I'll go on to see one of the other facts I've got is that from 2021 to 2022, the government estimates that there were 4.98 million homes that are on leasehold, and 30% are houses, 70% are flats, which is 20% of the total English housing stock. Do you think these will have increased over the last year?
100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, how? Well,
I just think obviously with the current economic climate at the moment, flats are an easy, more affordable way to get in, and I think you guys would have seen it as well. There's been a real rise in those kind of first-time property developers, just with social media making it a lot more accessible and learning how to raise money. And I think people used to think being a property developer was, incredibly hard to obtain the funds. But realistically, if you know the right people, you don't have to put something together and do your research. You can actually obtain funds. Isn't actually the hardest bit. It's finding the deals, which is the hardest bit these days. And I do think that there is going to be a rise in flats, and I think leasehold, I don't necessarily think will be an issue in years to come, because I think leases are so clean.
Yeah.
999 years now. I think people need to be wary. I came my old property I moved from last year was in a communal block, so we share a freehold. It was a freaking nightmare, if I'm being honest with you. Like I organise all my lads' holidays with my mates, and we're like 10 best mates. It's a nightmare trying to get 250 quid to go to Ibiza, let alone trying to get $4,000 for the roof that I live on the ground floor and I've got nothing to do with that roof at the top. But theoretically, we're all communally responsible for it. So I just think people just need to be wary that sometimes the grass isn't always greener. And I think actually having a freeholder at the top of the tree, which ultimately is the deciding force in the whole property. I don't know, I'm not articulating myself very well at all here, but you know what I mean. Having somewhere where you can fall back on, I actually think it's quite a good thing, as long as they maybe commit to a code of conduct, perhaps.
It's interesting because, everybody thinks of freehold, they just call it sitting down, collecting rent, and then collecting lease renewals. A massive part of it is obviously providing a service to the building, which includes service charges. So from just looking from a freeholder point of view, if somebody wanted to get involved in that business, how do you see the future on that side of the business?
Yeah, I mean, to become a freeholder? Yeah. So we've got a few freehold assets, nothing major, but we've got them from the reversionary element. Yeah. So when I say reversionary for the lister, I'm referring to the fact that there's lease extension income to come in the future. So it's a nice appreciating asset. If they don't extend the lease, I will get that flat for free. Oh. Wonderful. Yeah, that's how it works, basically.
How many years left on that one?
We've got 62. Ooh. So I'm sure they'll extend it. But the woman, I mean, it's a real because it's one of the ones where she lives above my mother, and it's a real tricky one because I'm not from that world. So I grew up on benefits. Like I'm not from that kind of capitalist world. But it's weird. You have to switch off the emotion when it comes to this is an investment now. And it's like, so when these reforms are coming in, some of the proposed reforms are absolutely hammer freeholders. Like get rid of marriage value, which is fundamentally for people listening, is the main part of the price that people pay for a lease extension. So could almost halve the cost of a lease extension in the future. It's never going to happen because you can't just rob from the rich and give to the poor. It's not. That's not in the world that I want to live in. I don't feel comfortable with that. So for freeholders moving forward, it used to be a lot of them would. The old way was they'd be developers traditionally, 10 or 12 units. They'd put on a £250 ground rent linked to RPI or something like that. Yeah. And then they would sell on that freehold to a commercial freehold investor for maybe 20 to 30 times.
So it could be like someone like for freshwater.
Freshwater, a lot of the pension funds loved it because if the ground rent arrears exceeded 350 quid, theoretically they could forfeit the flat. It's very rare. I mean, I've seen thousands and thousands of lease extensions in my time, and I think I've only seen 2 or 3 forfeitures. Yeah, and generally because they've been company-owned assets and stuff like that. But that's why pension funds loved them because they were so secure, because the asset was backed by the investment was backed by the asset. Yeah. So moving forward in terms of freeholders, I don't think it's going to be an asset class that people particularly want to get involved with. I think it'll be property management companies that buy freeholds purely so they can get the management. That's what I would be doing. But
do you expect, you mentioned, they would buy 20 times the income. That number presumably is
come right down. Whatever happens with the legislation, so once that's all done, it's currently in the House of Lords at the moment. Once that's done, and we know exactly how the lay of the land, then we might see prices kind of go back up again because you might have a 2-tier market where there might be no more ground rents coming through because there are no more ground rents now on new leases. But those ground rents still have a value. They still have the same forfeiture rights. They still apply, and the government cannot get rid of the forfeiture rights because that's what secures the asset. So it's a very interesting. it's really, really, really complex.
Even you will still have funds interested in secured income, although you might not get the high rate.
You're probably getting it 10 times, probably, is what I'd say. 10
which is 10%
Yeah, it's
return
not
on
bad.
money, which is not bad on secured against asset. Which,
No, not at all.
Which, you know,
It used to be like it was wild back in the day. it was nuts. Like I really look fondly back on those days.
I'm sure you do. I guess so. You briefly mentioned the bill, so that is in the government in the House of Lords at the moment. So that is the leasehold and freehold bill. What is it? Why have they brought it in? What do you know now, and when do we think it's going to come? through?
It's an ever-changing scene as it stands. Fundamentally, what the government are trying to do is they're trying to make it cheaper to extend your lease at the moment, and also trying to clear up leasehold, which I think we can all agree on is the right thing to do. But like I said previously, a lot of the changes they're doing would strip the value of that asset. So an asset that I think it's something like 5 to 6% of all the UK's pension funds are freehold grant rents.
That's quite a lot.
Quite a chunk.
Yeah.
And they can't just strip the value of that. It's not right because I think it was.
So when you say stripping the value, it's because there's a short lease in place that someone needs to extend that's going to cost money that the pension funds get.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And what they would do by some of the changes. So some of the changes was get rid of marriage value.
Yeah.
So that could halve the value of all these reversionary assets. Issues with that is ultimately you can't just do that. You can't just strip the value of something. It's like halving the value of people's houses just for no reason. And also, you've got to remember there'd be people that would have extended their lease, would have struggled, took out loans, done all that. And then, in like 1 month's time, they could have done it for that. So there's going to be some issues there. And also, for me, the ground rent side of things as well. So they want to just get rid of ground rent. So that's some of the uneducated people, in my opinion, were trying to say, these are MPs as well, saying stuff, just to win votes. Like, let's just get rid of all ground rents. You can't just get rid of ground rent. You can't just get rid of... For what is 200 quid a year? If you can't afford £200 a year, I don't think you should own a flat. It sounds a bit bad, but it's just my view on it.
It's no different than council tax.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, my council don't do anything like usually. So I think it would just send a really dangerous indicator to investment in the UK in terms of property, because they start with this: where does it go next? Especially foreign investment. I know, we're trying to bring foreign investment in for the UK property market to stimulate certain areas, and if they see that this is happening, where will it go next and next and next, and I think there will be changes, because even if it's Conservative or Labour that get in next, they still see this as a vote winner, or one of the big key opponents. So we will see. It's a really hot one because it will have to go to human rights if they do this big thing.
So it's going all that way as well.
If they put forward these proposed changes, and I think the numbers are mooted around very significantly, anything from 10 billion to 40 billion to compensation to the freeholders, right?
Wow.
And I would rather see that money invested in the NHS or our education system or our defence system or whatever, not into just a compensation. And I don't really think there's any winners. And just one final point on that is I've done these 6,000 lease extensions now, and I have never ever seen the purchase price plus the lease extension exceed what it would be worth of a long lease.
Fine.
Like within reason, obviously. Like if someone bought it like 20 years ago for £5,000, and within like a 12, 24 month period, it works. The system does actually work, and it is designed to be profitable. But I just think there's been I don't know. It's just very stressful for me.
So do you think it's going to be worse than it is actually? More, I guess, is it going to be more hassle than it is worth?
I don't think they've thought through the next stages.
Fine.
I think they see it as a big vote winner for, wonderful, we've made lease extensions cheaper. But I don't think they've looked at the compensation side of things properly. Michael Gove says, I'm confident there won't be an issue of human rights. I was like, you're not a human rights law. You can't, it's a pretty strong, it's about interfering with people's enjoyment of their property. Like, it's a pretty strong human rights element, and it's just going to be and also for me from a logical point of view, because flats pretty much underpin every property chain, so if you start messing around with all the flats, then that's going to start holding up everything else. So you can theoretically grind the property market to a halt, within reason, of course. But it's just this just doesn't seem to be any logic. And the people they speak to the government, I don't necessarily think are the right people that are gonna. They're without being horrible to anyone. They're just kind of getting old, stuffy, posh people in front of the posh of the government. And I don't think that's really going to help when you're trying to maybe put forward an argument that's going to be a bit more in the middle.
Yeah.
Like, it's that versus that. It's like, maybe just go down there.
And when do you think it might actually go, like, or do they have an aim of when to close it? Or
they weren't done for the election, but I just don't think they'll get that in place. Like, there's so many amendments every time to every bill they put forward. So we get questioned, asked a lot, like, oh, should I hold out? Should I hold out to extend my lease?
It's going to be my next question.
If your lease is probably between 85 and 80, anything above 83 years, you can maybe hold out for a little bit. On sub 80 years, I don't really see the necessity to do it, and I would just get it done because I can't really see the changes being anywhere near what people think they are going to be.
So let's say I've got a lease that's under 80 years.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say it's 72 years. There's no point in me holding out till 71 years.
It's up to you.
Does the value of that property just every year just keep going down and down and down?
It will be dropping, yeah.
So you would, the sooner you do it, the better, because then you're just in more of a...
Yeah, just and also you can't remember the reason most people do lease extensions are a remortgage or they're selling. You don't tend to get people just doing it for willy-nilly.
Okay, fine. So actually, if you're just sitting on it and you don't have anything to do with it, it doesn't really matter until
you can just leave it. My advice is always just to get your lease extended and move on. But if you are selling, you haven't got time to wait.
Yeah.
And if you are remortgaging, you might need that money. So it's a real tricky one. We get asked every day, and we actually had a question yesterday of a lawyer because one of our rivals was putting in, if you don't extend your lease today, it may become cheaper. It may be X in 2 years. I was like, you're playing a really dangerous game here of, like, from a liability point of view. It doesn't quite sit well with me. But it's been hard because we've had to sit there thinking, we might be out of a job when it comes to the reforms. Because they've also spoke about having a standardised calculator online. It's like a go-to, just one go-to thing. A bit like stamp duty calculator on the government website. Like, bang, 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 done. That's it. So we'd be out of a job. So
how would that work? Presumably, you still have to account for the value of the flat.
Yeah, but they're talking about council tax. They've had some ludicrous ideas, like council tax banding and all this stuff, how to work stuff out.
Yeah.
But it just kind of shows, unfortunately, the policymakers that are writing the legislation, they're not experts in property. They're not experts in leasehold. Last year they were writing policy for the NHS. Like they're just writing policy because they're policy makers. So it's just a little bit. When you're not on the front line, it's like having someone that's never been to war trying to tell you how to go to war. And I was like, well, you're not the one on the front line. You're not the one seeing what it's like. So.
Is there anything you can do to, like, help the cause, or is it like actually it's in their hands? You just got to sit back and see what
we try to. I'm a vocal little rascal, so I often speak with the guys at the Residential Freeholders Association. I also speak with a guy called Harry Scoffin, who's very vocal on these guys are the polar opposites. So it's like in Russia and Ukraine. They're both very different sides of the story. So it's like working out, taking their arguments, accepting what they're saying, and then taking what he's saying, and like, actually, no, you've got a point. We've both got points.
Yeah.
But it's trying to get in front of the right people. And they've both sides have got insights into the government, etc. And I think they're both handling their cases very well. But obviously, when you've got massive pension funds one side, and you've got a baying mob on one side, it's like it's really hard to kind of get in front of the right people. But I just keep plugging away. We've done a few like big debates in front of we've done one at the House of Commons, which is cool. Not House of Commons, or somewhere around there. And we're just trying to get involved with as much as we can. Yeah. But if you are someone listening, do feel quite passionate about it, or even if you want to get abolished leasehold, or if you actually think that your freehold's being really well managed, just write to your local MP. That's the best thing you can do at the moment. I know we haven't got much faith in our current politicians, but if you do have a view and want to try and get in front of them, especially in certain like areas as well, like where I'm from in Southend, like we, God rest his soul, our MP was the one that got horrifically murdered a couple of years ago. That was our local MP. But he was actually kind of right down the middle. He kind of saw both sides, and he was actually really good on that front. And he actually understood it.
Which changes do you think actually do make sense?
Scrapping the 2-year rule, so having to wait 2 years of ownership, that will go.
So sorry. So the rule at the moment is that if I've got a short lease, I have to wait for 2 years before I can extend it.
You have to owned it for 2 years.
That just doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make any sense. I think it was to stop like traders and stuff.
Okay.
A bit like when you have like an overage clause to stop people trading within 12 months. Like it's that kind of thing. That will come in. I think there will be some. I think you can make the time frames shorter.
So how long does it take to extend a lease?
You serve a Section 42 notice on me. I'm your freeholder.
So that means my Section 42 notice is coming to you, the freeholder, saying that I'm going to extend my lease.
Yep.
And I'm starting the proceedings as of.
So when you serve a Section 42 notice, your notice has got to be a figure that's justifiable. So your opening offer, it can't be like £1. It's got to be a figure that's justifiable. Otherwise, I would say it's invalid.
Right, so I'm negotiating with you to extend my lease.
Correct.
Got it. And you.
But when I come back to you with my official counter, I've got 2 months to come back to you. I can dilly-dally for 2 months. When I come back with my official counter offer, I can put whatever number I bloody want in. I could put £20 million if I want. That will change. I think that should change because I think that's wrong. I think 2 months is probably a fair time in terms of organising everything.
Yeah.
And then you've almost got you've got like a 6-month negotiation window.
Yeah.
To try and negotiate. And obviously, as we all know here, time is a big tradable.
Yeah.
So the freeholders will often push it out. You've got a little window where you can try and get it agreed really quickly. And I think that can work quite well. Or you just string it right out. And then if you can't agree, then you make application to tribunal.
Right. So it really does go
12, 18 months sometimes, maybe longer.
And me, who, let's say I've got the short-term lease, that's when I'm consulting all my other parties to figure out how much is actually fair.
Correct. So you've got your own advisor,
which is costing me money.
You've got your own surveyor. So you're probably paying in the region of about $1,500 to $2,000 for your surveyor.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be paying probably $2,500 for your solicitor. But because you want me to extend the lease for you, you've got to pay my costs as well. So now
then we've got to pay. Then I've got to pay the cost of the lease.
And because I'm a rich freeholder,
yeah,
I've got expensive surveyors and expensive lawyers, you know. So I think what they'll do is they'll make the freeholders cost. They'll probably cap what the freeholders can the freeholders can charge. But that is a bit of a grey area because they were trying to say that freeholders should cover their own costs, which I don't necessarily agree with. Because if I came to you and said, I'm forcing you to buy your house, but you've got to pay your fees as well, it doesn't quite work. There's a couple of other little small nuances that would be a bit more on a technical basis. One of them being that when we do the calculation, you have to presume that flat is the only flat in the country that doesn't have access to the 1993 Leasehold Reform Act. So as if they couldn't extend their lease. It's a very weird, stupid nuance, but it makes quite a bit of difference to the premium. Yeah. So they'll scrap that. I think other than that, I mean, the 999-year leases is more just a bit of wordplay, really, because the flats aren't going to be around for 999 years, neither are we. But I get why they're doing it. And I get the capping of the ground rents to a degree, which they've done, but they've already got rid of ground rents. So I actually think it's pretty clear. And I think maybe just have a standard lease for every lease extension moving forward. So every lease is the same.
Okay, so it is...
So everyone's working off the same thing. That would save a lot in legal fees and stuff. Because sometimes I've seen clauses in leases that are very craftily worded, and they do trip you up because you just don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be one. But other than that,
I guess these kind of rules or this regulation is going to impact the solicitors. They don't want it because they're going to lose income.
It's the freeholder solicitors I think are most worried, and freeholders valuers, because we're valuers for freeholders, and it's where you can claim the fees back because we get our fees paid by the leaseholders. Mm-hmm. It's tricky because if the freeholder's got to start paying your fees, then not that your service should ever not be top level, but like they're going to be start to expect top, and obviously where there's going to be an issue is because the top valuers aren't going to necessarily want to drop their fees because the freeholders aren't. So it's so many moving parts happening to it. So We will see, but I think those changes would make a massive change to the whole thing and actually really clear up the whole process. But we don't know.
What about and moving slightly off topic? Commercial freeholds
Yep.
and commercial leases. That's obviously dramatically different than residential properties. Are there opportunities on there? What sort of, if I'm a leaseholder on a commercial property, what are my rights? What can I do? And
Yeah. So I'm not an expert in commercial by any stretch, so I'll try and answer that in the best way I can from what I'm seeing from existing clients at the moment. I think for me, the way I see commercial at the moment, I see it as long-term wealth. It's commercial investments. I feel like residential investment is short-term wins a lot of the time in terms of it's nice lump sums come and go. But we've seen a lot of our clients now move into the commercial space now. We get involved with quite a lot of DLAPS work for a lot of our commercial investors. And it's an interesting one because obviously, like after COVID, it was a real great time to get involved with the commercial space because everyone offices were getting so cheap, weren't they?
Yeah.
And
still,
they're still, and working from home's had a big impact on stuff still. Like, I maybe work from home on like a Monday and a Friday, so we're not really in the office much. And I think the way people are working has really changed. And I think office spaces and office creators and commercial agents really need to change their approach to their spaces. And they're not necessarily as they used to be now. They need to be more versatile, offer more services. You need to kind of cater for communal spaces. I think stuff like industrial will always do well, generally, just by nature of what it is. It's something I'd really like to go and get into more. We've done a fair bit of equestrian recently, which has been nice. I've really enjoyed that stuff. That stuff's been really enjoyable. Stables, yeah. So we've done one. It was like 12 theoretical. I can't remember what they were called again. Bits for the horses, and we just had to work that out on an investment method. A bit like a HMO, to be honest. It's kind of a similar calculation.
Each horse pays the rent.
Pretty much, they're expensive.
Yeah.
So I think diversification of people's portfolios will come from commercial investments. And I think the gateway for that from a lot of people will be, if they're going from resi to commercial, will be HMO style investments. I think they'll start off on their little buy-to-lets and move into the HMO to get used to that investment method kind of calculation, and then slowly make their way into commercial. But I think unless you've been ingrained in commercial, especially we've noticed it, our valuers are either resi or commercial. There's no kind of, they don't seem to overlap much. So forgive me for not giving you a more kind of in-depth answer to that, but that's just I'm a resi boy, but I'd like to do more commercial.
From a freehold leasehold relationship point of view. So, for example, we looked a while back. One of the investments we were looking at buying was a dentistry practice in the West End, and actually they own essentially the leasehold space. And one thing actually that put us off was the fact that it had a short lease.
Yeah.
So you had the tenant. So we said sort of the middle lease. You had the freehold of the building. We had a tenant who had 5 years on the lease, but we were going to buy 50 years or so on the leasehold. And our view was obviously you got no rights similar to residential to extend the lease. And for us was sort of how we secure our capital.
It's a lot more risky, but the paydays are a lot more greater. It's but I think there will become I think long-term commercial, I do think there will become a bit more legislation to make it a bit more secure, because it is a bit of a wild west out there. I remember trying to negotiate a lease in our old office, and there was no real rhyme or reason to anything. And I was they were talking about zoning off stuff, and I was just like, but there's a real lack of really good commercial surveyors, in my opinion, out there. We're trying to hire one at the moment, and it's trying to find one's really tricky, because all the good ones are on their own, and they don't want to, they don't want anyone to go out somewhere. So but sorry, I wasn't a better answer to that one. So.
Cool. Well, I've got just one more question before we'll wrap this up.
Cool.
What happens if a leasehold expires?
What happens? So, say we try to agree your lease extension, you can't afford it.
Yeah.
I've been really greedy, and you're like, do you know what? I'm just going to let it run out. You see it quite a bit in prime central London, actually. People will just buy these like 4-year leases.
There's those places in Regent Street where there's in like 20-year leases, right?
So what you do is you buy them, and then as soon as the lease expires, it becomes technically the freeholder's flat, but they can't kick out the leaseholder as long as it's their residence. They just have to pay a market rent till they die.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what a lot of people will do is it's quite an interesting model if you run the numbers. You'll see these like 5-6 year lease remaining ones in auction. They actually work out quite profitable because a lot of people will just buy them for 6 years and just let them expire and then enjoy the rent. You know, it works out probably cheaper than renting somewhere, you know, paying 4 or 5 grand a month for renting. You actually might as well just go and buy a really short lease and just enjoy it for a little bit and then move on. And then if you do want to extend the lease at the end, you can try and do that at the end. So that's what happens at the end of the lease. It's very rare though that actually does happen. I think the shortest one we've done is 26 days.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That was a short one.
Yeah.
That was very stressful.
I can imagine.
That was in Redcliffe Gardens, that was. So it was a proper expensive flat as well. And I was like, you really need to get this done. But yeah, they ended up getting it sorted. And it was
Is there a big gap between what you had to pay for the extension?
Oh, you're basically paying the purchase price.
You're paying the purchase price.
Yeah, you're basically paying the full. There's not, I think, I'll leave you on this bit. I think sometimes people think that those 0 to maybe 10, 15, 20 years are the most profitable ones because they see prime central London. They say, oh, wonderful, sexy, lovely. For me, if you are going to go into that short lease investment strategy, I would personally be aiming between kind of 75 and 50 years and sitting around that 150 to 250 grand purchase price sweet spot. Because that allows you to kind of really benefit from not a huge amount of risk, and then the most profitable ones, and allows you to kind of leverage your money in the most.
So that would be you buying it, extending it, and selling it.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it.
That's
Simple.
It is. It's a really nice little model. It really does work.
Well, thank you so much, Colin, for joining us today.
No worries.
Thank you, Dani. And thank you to all of our listeners. If you've got any questions for Colin, all of the details will be in the show notes. Where can they find you on socials?
If you type in Colin Horton on LinkedIn, that's my main platform, but CJN Horton on Instagram.
Great. And everything else will be in show notes. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.